Hello and welcome back to Try Your Hand. I'm Brenda and today our project is going to be a paper mache moon. So this will be a decoration that you can hang on your wall or really put anywhere. So why don't we get started with the supplies. So the first thing that we need is a piece of cardboard. You will also be given 2 stacks of newspaper. You need a container. This will not be in your kit. You will also need some glue, some salt, some flour. You will also need aluminum foil, a bit of wire. You will need some tape, a paintbrush, white and black paint, and a hot glue gun. So the first thing that you need to do is to take your piece of cardboard, and if you have a pencil, take your pencil out. What we're going to do is we're going to make the base of our paper mache moon, and we need to make it a circle. So if you have a compass, which I have here with me, you can use a compass. Otherwise, you can just freehand a circle. And that's what I'm showing you here, is how to freehand a circle. After that, you want to just take a pair of scissors and just cut that out. Now that we have our base, what we need to do is make our form. So essentially what this project is like if the moon was cut in half. So we need to make it look like a dome in the front. So what we're going to do is take some pieces of newspaper and we're going to crumple them up and put them all together until it gets to like the roundness that we want. When I was done with crumpling paper and sticking it together, as you can see, it starts to like undo. I covered the newspaper ball that I made with aluminum foil so that it all stuck together. And then what I did after that is make sure that it fit on my template, on my little base. And I wanted to make it big enough so that it didn't like indent once I started putting the paper mache strips on there. So I'm just making it big enough so that the edges of that crumpled ball of paper is like right up to the edge. So once I had my like dome section finished, I took a bit of wire and then I taped it or glued it onto my base. That way, if I wanted to hang it up on the wall or anything, I could use the wire to do that. Gluing the dome section onto my cardboard base helps with keeping the wire in place. So that's what I did. I took some hot glue and then glued my base right on there, and then just as I was pressing it down, I was seeing where there was like sections that were lifting up, and then I put a little bit more glue in that section and then pressed down until the glue set. So now that we have our form complete, we need to make our paper mache paste. So I kind of made my own little recipe here. So I used 1 cup of warm water. So you can use cold water, but I found that using warm water helps the flour kind of mix in better so that there aren't any lumps. So I would suggest doing that. Then you want a 1/2 cup of flour. So there I have a 1/4 cup. So I used 2 scoops of my 1/4 cup and put it in with the water. I also then put some salt in the mixture. I put about an 1/8 cup of salt in there. What this is for is to kill any like bacteria so that the paste doesn't go bad or moldy. This is helpful for when like you leave your paper mache to dry. You don't want it getting moldy or anything. So the salt helps with that. After that, I put in about a 1/4 cup of glue. These measurements aren't really all that exact. Really, what you want is a consistency that you like. So there are a whole bunch of different recipes that you can use. This is the one that I personally liked. So this is what you can use. If you need more paste than this, that's fine. You know, you can make some more. If you, let's say, are doing this within the next few days, you can refrigerate this to make it last longer. Now that you have all of your ingredients in your container, you want to mix everything well so that there aren't any lumps or anything like that. So it's actually better if you use a whisk. Sometimes if you have like an immersion blender, that would help too. Just any way that you have, just mix it as best as you can. Once you're done mixing, we can then start to prep our newspaper. So what I did is I cut, so if you open up your newspaper, I cut it right on the seam of like the spine of the newspaper, if you can call it that. And then I cut that 1/2 page in half. And then I just cut strips about an inch or so wide. You can make them bigger or smaller to your preference. This is the size of strip that I found to be the most helpful considering the size of my project. So now that everything is prepped, we can start paper macheing. So what I did for this was just dip your strip of newspaper into your mixture and then with your fingers take off any excess. Once you've taken off excess, just put it onto your form. Because we have our form wrapped in tin foil, this first layer will slide around a little bit, so you just want to be careful with that. But you do want to layer your paper mache kind of like a little bit on top of each other, as I will show you here. I also found it to be helpful to go in all sorts of different directions. I don't particularly know why, it just felt good to me. So once you have your paper mache, you're paper macheing, you're putting it all onto your form, just make sure to smooth out your pieces of paper, your pieces of newspaper, just so that you don't get any like pieces of newspaper kind of lifting up when it dries. I noticed that if I didn't smooth it out enough, that's what would happen. So just smooth it out. It's okay if you have a couple of wrinkles here or there, because at the end stage of this project, you'll see that it actually makes for a cool effect. But yeah, just make sure that all like the edges of the paper are nicely smoothed out. So once you have your first layer done, you can do a little bit more layering while it's still wet like this. What I did is take like dry pieces of newspaper and then put it right like on my form here. Because the first layer is still wet, you don't need as quite as much paste anymore. So then I would put it on and then take a little bit of paste with my fingers and then kind of rub it in. And that seemed to really help. If you want, what you can do is let it dry first, this first layer, but I was a little bit impatient and decided to do a second layer while it was still a little bit wet, using this technique so that I wasn't using too much paste and making it like super hard to dry. So while we wait for our form to dry, what we are going to do now is make our moon rings, our crater impacts. So what I did is I just took a piece of tin foil. Really, it does not matter what size. It just depends on your preference on how big you want your craters to be. So I just took a bit of tin foil and just rolled it into like a log and then connected those ends together with a bit of tape. You can really use anything. You could use tape, you can use glue, you can just leave it if you want. But in any case, I did a couple of them, maybe like 3 or so, of these rings. So another thing that you can do if you're super impatient like me is to take like a hair dryer and put it to your project. That helps it dry pretty well in between your layers. You will still need to let it dry overnight or for a few hours. This technique, depending on the strength of your hair dryer, it might not fully dry it all the way. You can tell when it's fully dry when you tap it. It gets like quite hard and not as soft or pliable. After I used the hair dryer, while it was like dry to the touch, it was still a little bit bendy, all those strips of paper, which isn't really what you want. So you do want to like eventually let it dry overnight, just so that it gets that hardness that you want. But this is a good solution for if you want to do a few layers in one day and you don't want to like wait for a super long time between layers. Okay, so once you're done making the rings, you will then want to put it onto your form. This will happen when it's completely and fully dry. So if you tap your project, it'll make like this hollow sound. That's what you want. It'll be set. So what you'll do is take your hot glue gun, or you can tape it on if you'd like as well, and then see where it is that you want your little craters to be, and then just attach them to your form. Once you have attached them to your form, you can then start paper macheing those forms. Like I said previously, they will it will be a little bit slippery at first because of the tinfoil. But once you get that first layer down, it will be easier to then put more of the newspaper strips onto your project to smooth over those edges. So I just did it a couple of times, a couple of layers. Once you're done, that seemed to be enough. So now that we are done paper macheing our project, we now have to paint it. So I'm going to take some white and some black and mixing it together. We want a medium tone of gray, so we're taking about equal amounts of white and equal amounts of black and mixing it together. We're going to paint the entire project in this color as like a base. The reason I gave you white and black and not just like a gray paint is because we'll be using lighter shades of gray and darker shades of gray to make details on our project. So once you get your medium tone gray all mixed up, you want to start painting it onto all aspects of your project, making sure to get in all those nooks and crannies. You just want to look over your project, make sure that there's no newspaper that's showing through your paint. So once you got your base layer of gray onto your project, what you want to do is accentuate the shadows. So what I did with this is to take the original gray that I mixed up and then just add a little bit more black and then start to put that darker gray in the areas where there would be shadow. So for this, it would be like the inside parts of the craters and a little bit like on the bottom sides of the craters. Um, and that makes it look like there's some shadows going on in there. Um, Really just look at your project and go like, if there was like a light shining right at it, like where are the shadows? You can do this, you can take like a flashlight or something and just like point it down, and if you look at where the shadows go, that's where you want that gray, that darker gray to be. So, like I said before about the wrinkles, having wrinkles is okay because it gives your project a little bit more texture. So, I kind of looked around and tried to find the little wrinkles in my project and took a little of that darker gray and then kind of like underlined those little sections there as if like they're like little risen sections of my moon, like little tiny like mountains or something, just to kind of make it look more interesting. You can also like lightly like take your bigger brush and like dip it in paint and then like brush the paint off the bristles a little bit on your plate or wherever you have your paint, and then like dry brush some sections. The texture kind of catches the paint and it leaves this like really cool effect if you want to do that. I also tried to blend as much as I could. So in some sections, maybe there was a stark line that I didn't really like. So for example, I'm doing shadows right here, and you can see sort of that there's like this like very stark section of darker gray. And then usually to fix that, you just kind of try and blend it out a little bit. Sometimes it would take a little bit of white and kind of just like mix it in there in the still wet paint a little bit just to kind of make it look a little bit better. So now that I'm done with the shadows, I'm going to make some highlights. So again, I took that same like medium gray color that I painted the whole project in and just added a little bit more white to it. And then I started to paint the points in my project that light would hit it most in that lighter gray color. So this is like the very edges of the craters, and also like the very center of the craters would be hit with more light than, let's say, like where the corners of the craters are. So I took a little bit of that gray and then kind of painted those areas and tried to make it blend as much as I could. I also used that same dry brush technique that I told you about before, where I kind of took some paint on my brush and then kind of brushed it off a little bit on my plate or like a napkin or something. And then with that like little amount of paint that I have on my brush, I'm just very lightly brushing all over my moon, so that paint is caught by these little textures that are on my moon, just to give it a little bit more dimension. I also put some more of that lighter gray color in like the center of my moon. That seemed to make it look a little bit more realistic, because that's what you're trying to do with this painting section, is just to kind of make your moon look more realistic. So once I kind of got everything the way that I wanted it, I just kind of looked over my project and just made sure that none of the newspaper was kind of poking through. Another thing that you can do as a finishing step is to maybe seal it. So you can use some sort of sealer. You can use Mod Podge when everything is all nice and dry, just to make sure that the paint doesn't like come off or anything like that. I didn't with my project, but you can do it with yours. I hope you guys had a ton of fun doing this project. I know that I certainly did. Sometimes it's good to be messy. And I hope to see you guys for the next Try Your Hand. So we will be making our own book nook. If you don't know what that is, it's like a little tiny miniature scene in like a book-sized box. It looks really, really cool, and I'm having a ton of fun making this project, so I am excited for it. So if you have not signed up already, please do so. We hope to see you next time. Bye.